So Jonathan Jones is at it again. Jon Jones has now came out and said, look, I need 6 months to prepare for Tom Aspinall. Like this man hasn't known that this is, if he's going to come back and fight in the UFC, that this was going to be the fight. Like, right, Dana White already said this numerous times that Tom Aspinall was going to be the next fight for Jon Jones. The only way that they would book the Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones fight is if Jon gets through Tom Aspinall. So Jon's out there basically like, oh man, it's a shame that Ankalaev won because I can't run from Tom Aspinall anymore. Because you absolutely know, we all know, if Alex Pereira would have beaten Magomed Ankalaev, Jon would have been all over social media talking about how unbelievable Alex Pereira is and how that's the fight to make and this and that. And now he's backed into a corner to where the cat is starting to bring the claws out because it doesn't have anywhere to go. And that is, I believe, what we are seeing with Jon Jones at this time. So I want to talk about, do I think this fight's going to happen? What's next? And my growing concerns for Tom Aspinall and why I believe the UFC is letting Jonathan Jones get away with this shit. And, you know, this has been something that's been brewing for a long time, right? When Tom Aspinall goes out there and KOs a scary guy in Sergey Pavlovich and wins the interim title in spectacular fashion, he basically took the MMA sport by storm. Right now, everyone kind of knows who Tom Aspinall is. And a lot of that has to do with, yes, he has attached his name to Jon Jones. So this has definitely been something that has helped Tom Aspinall's name get into the limelight, which all is very, very good. And then we have Jon Jones, who has basically been inactive over the past several years. He comes back, puts on a very good performance against Cyril Gane. We got to give him his credit there. But we all know that Gane has holes in the grappling, right? You don't think that that was some strategic matchup that the UFC put together? Come on, man. We all know that that was a strategic matchup, right? Strategic matchmaking. We see it at its finest from the UFC. That was a perfect example. And then now we have Tom Aspinall, who he's defended an interim title, man. He wins an interim title against Sergey Pavlovich, defends an interim title by KOing Curtis Blades in the first round. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? How is Tom Aspinall, who's in the prime of his career, hitting his stride, the future of the heavyweight division, is being iced right now like a damn kicker? This is terrible, and the UFC is allowing this to happen, man. They're allowing this to happen, which I'll discuss why I think that they're doing that. But, you know, it's just frustrating, man. It feels like we're never going to see this fight. 6 months? You know how much can happen in 6 months? Like, why 6 months? Like, and to me, this is all just BS games from Jon Jones. Like, I do believe that we see this every time with Jon Jones when there is a super scary fight on the horizon for him. We kind of saw this a little bit with the Jan Blachowicz matchup that was supposed to happen. We saw this when the Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones talk started to happen. And now we're seeing it with the Tom Aspinall talks. And what do I mean? Every time there is a scary challenge in front of Jon Jones, it just so happens that he needs more money than ever. He needs all these different, circumstances. The UFC and everyone has to meet all these specific terms for Jon Jones to take the damn fight. He is the heavyweight champion. He's not a Nate Diaz or a Jorge Masvidal where it's like, oh, I am the belt, right? And I just kind of pick and choose whoever I fight like Conor McGregor has kind of done, right? You are the champion. When you have a belt, there is an obligation to defend the title. Not just sit there and pick and choose your matchups. Vacate the title then. Vacate the title then, right? But now we're in this position where Jon basically is strong-arming the UFC. And this is what I've been talking about, to where the UFC is trying to, I think, control some of the stardom moving forward with the fighters to not end up in positions like this. Jon Jones knows that the UFC and Dana White, for whatever reason, are just insanely obsessed with him. Insanely obsessed with him. And I'm starting to think that maybe he's got some dirt on him or something. I mean, I just don't get it. But the real, maybe, but I really think that what this comes down to is They look at Jon Jones as like the last of I don't want to say dying breed, but the last of the breed of the OGs, right? And I've been up here talking about this time and time again, that Dana and the UFC have this bias towards the old heads, right? The Stipe Miocic, the Jon Jones, the Conor McGregors, the guys that were really help elevate the sport. They feel like like the Adesanyas, they feel like they owe these guys something or something. I don't know, but they have this bias to these fighters. And that's what we're seeing with Jon Jones, because Jon is essentially the last megastar left on the UFC roster right now. He absolutely is. Whether you like Jon Jones or not, he is the last megastar on the roster. The UFC knows that. And I think that that's why they're just getting, pinned up against the wall, thrown around, punched in the face, elbowed in the nuts. Like, they are just doing whatever Jon Jones says and wants, because they feel like they have to. They don't have this other megastar that they can turn to really bring all the audiences together. Because in a sense, that's kind of what we're missing in the UFC right now. Like, I recently made a video talking about, does the UFC have a star problem, which I'll link that down below. But it's like, we don't have the megastar factor, right? And so the UFC knows with Jon Jones, it brings out all the audiences, the old heads, the casuals, the hardcores, and it gets people who don't even care about fighting, who know Jon Jones, to tune in and watch the fight. That's what it's all about. But I also think that there's a little bit of a strategic move going on here by the UFC. And I'm going to talk about that. The UFC's investment is, what have we seen from the UFC throughout the years, right? We've seen the guys that they pave the way, they become a big name, right? And then what happens? They start to get a little bit older, father time starting to catch up. What happens? They give them to that next up-and-coming guy in hopes that the next up-and-coming guy can beat the OG. And now they add that name to their resume, and that helps build the star, right? We're kind of seeing that, we've seen that a lot in the UFC. We just saw Mauricio Rufy go out there and get a matchup with Bobby Green. We all knew how that was going to go, right? That's part of the strategic matchmaking that the UFC does. So the investment of Jon Jones fighting Tom Aspinall, it might be one of the biggest the UFC can make, because they know that, look, if Jon Jones does win this fight, Dana White, he's going to be like, I told everybody, we told you Jon Jones is the GOAT, right? And then Jon Jones rides off into the sunset, maybe takes another fight, who knows? But then it proves Dana to make him look like some genius or something, right? But if Aspinall wins, the investment pays off. The investment pays off because Jon Jones is technically unbeaten, right? Yeah, we know about the Dominic Reyes fight and, all the little things that have happened in Jon Jones's career. But he's technically hasn't been beaten, right? I mean, you could say that he lost to Dominic Reyes, but with the elbows, the 12-6 elbows, like, get that out of here, right? Like, in today's game, that's a win at this point. So Jon Jones has basically never been beaten. If Tom Aspinall goes out there and KOs Jon Jones, I think that makes you a megastar, right? And Tom Aspinall is already becoming a big name. So my point is this. I don't know that the fight happens, because I don't think Jon wants to roll the dice giving Tom Aspinall that scenario, right? Jon knows the game. Jon is a lot of things, right? I do think that Jon has a lot of issues. Jon has done a lot of horrible things. Jon's not a fucking idiot. Jon sees this, man. That's why he's being so difficult, because he knows that he's kind of the last draw, right? Instead of the last straw, right? Like, Jon Jones he's the last draw per se, right? The last big megastar. He knows that the UFC, in a sense, kind of needs him to a degree. Conor McGregor's running for president in Ireland. Like, Khabib's retired. Brock Lesnar's retired. Nate Diaz, who knows if he's coming back? There aren't any megastars in action right now. Jon is the Lone Ranger. He knows it, and that's why he has all this leverage. The UFC's letting him get away with it, but we need some finalization here. Book the fight or move the hell on, because we are wasting and holding up Tom Aspinall's prime. Tom Aspinall, he's the future of the UFC. He's the future of the heavyweight division, which, by the way, is essentially the big division. Like, when you look at the heavyweight champion, like, that's supposed to be the man. That's supposed to be the guy, right? With Jon Jones, do we feel that? I don't. Do you? If Aspinall was the champion, a guy who goes out there and knocks people out, I feel that. Francis Ngannou, I feel that. Those are guys that have like this aura to them, this like scariness to them where they knock people out. And I know Tom Aspinall's a nice guy. Oh, Jon, I'd love to fight you, Jon. Like, make no mistake about it. Tom Aspinall can bounce anyone's head off the canvas in the heavyweight division and knock their ass out. Tom Aspinall has all of the qualities to become a star. He's fed up. The fan base is fed up. And now we are getting to a crossroads point where it's make the fight or move the hell on. That's what this comes down to. But I want to point this out because I think that this is very important. Tom Aspinall is growing frustrated, right? He's growing frustrated. His dad, who is his coach, who chimed in and had some funny things to say about Jon Jones. They're trying to poke the bear a little bit, see if they can, wake him up, get him to get this thing moving. And we all know how Jon is. Jon's going to play this game. He's going to ride this out for however long he can get away with it. But I don't think that the UFC is going to give him another fight unless it's Aspinall. So it's either Aspinall or retire. Vacate and retire, basically, right? And so I'm getting concerned that Tom Aspinall is obviously wasting his prime to a degree. He's getting so frustrated that is this part of the game plan of Jon Jones? Like, Jon Jones is a lot older now. He's not in his prime anymore. Yes, he is incredibly skilled, incredibly well-rounded, and I actually think that he has a pretty good shot of beating Tom Aspinall if he can make it through the early portion of the fight and not get caught by a big shot. I do believe Jon Jones is actually the better overall mixed martial artist. It's just the fact that he's older. He doesn't really have power in his hands. But if he can make it through the early, onslaught of Aspinall, I think Jon has a really good shot at winning this fight. So I don't think that it's like this crazy 90% Aspinall, 10% Jones. Like, I don't believe that at all. I actually think Jon has a real shot at winning the fight, which is the craziest thing about it. But we're at the point where is Jon playing some of these games to rile up Aspinall, frustrate him, a guy who's so nice in Tom Aspinall, so buttoned up, who doesn't really get worked up about anything. This is kind of the first time we're seeing Aspinall worked up. Is that part of the game that Jones is playing here? I absolutely think that he doesn't want this fight. I absolutely think that that's the case, right? Because why would he be playing all these games, calling for the Pineda fight, doing all this other stuff? Like, we've seen at this point, Jon is basically ducking this fight. We've seen that. We've been alluding to that for a while. He's playing hardball on purpose, man. Of course, is he using it as a negotiation tactic because he's like, you need me? Sure. But he knows that this is the biggest risk of his career. That's why he played this game with Ngannou. It's the same scenario. He's like, I need FU money to take this fight. That's the situation we're in with Jon Jones right now. And it's frustrating Aspinall. And it maybe, Jon's trying to rile him up so much that if they do take a fight, Aspinall fights out of character. And then, that allows, he comes out big, swinging big. Jon dips underneath, takes him down, controls him, wears on him. And now it favors Jon Jones. You see what I'm saying? Maybe there's that element to it. Maybe not. I'm just, thinking of things here. But the last thing that I want to leave you with is this. I do get a little bit worried with Aspinall here because whenever you're hearing the whole fan base and so many people, well, not the whole fan base, the majority, saying Tom Aspinall's going to knock your ass out. Tom Aspinall's the guy. He's the future, which he absolutely is. And that's who the UFC should be pushing and investing in is the future that is Aspinall, not the past that is Jon Jones, in my opinion. But it's when you start to hear that you're the man, you're the man, you're the man for so long, does Tom Aspinall start to drink and sip his own Kool-Aid here? Does he start to think that Jon's actually truly afraid of me? Jon is, even though we do think that Jon is, to a degree, definitely worried about this fight. He knows that Aspinall can definitely KO him. But does Aspinall start to kind of buy into his own hype a little bit and maybe sort of overlook Jon Jones? Like, I'm not saying that he's going to do that, but when everyone around you is just going, you're the man, you're the man, you're the man, Jon's scared of you, man, Jon's scared of you, man, and you go in there and you kind of have this air to you, like imagine when they're looking across from each other if the fight happens, Aspinall's like, you've been ducking me this whole time. You're scared of me. You don't believe that you could beat me. And Jon comes out there after having Aspinall all riled up, all these different things, and gets him to fight out of character and is able to frustrate the young buck and win the fight. These are different things that I've been thinking about. I absolutely want this fight. Make no mistake about it. I absolutely want this fight. I mean, how could you not want this fight? This is probably one of, if not the biggest heavyweight fight of all time. One of the biggest fights they could make in the organization right now at present, other than Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. Right? We need this fight. The UFC needs to get this figured out. And if we can't get it figured out, move on. Move on. Get Cyril Gane in there versus Tom Aspinall. I know it doesn't have the same amount of hype and this and that, but come on, man. Like, Aspinall's the future. The heavyweight champion of the UFC is very important. It's always been important. Now, Jon, who's been a horrible champion at heavyweight, right? He's been so annoying to deal with. Aspinall has this, he has the same amount of title defenses at heavyweight as Jon. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Get the fight booked. It should have happened before. The Stipe fight should have never have happened. This is the situation that we're in. I think Tom Aspinall knows that, look, if we can't get this done, he's been sitting out for almost a year now since KOing Curtis Blades, took no damage in that fight. We want to get it rolling. How do you build stars? Activity, activity, activity. Remember Conor back in the day? Nate Diaz, Khabib, these guys were fighting, man. They were fighting consistently. When Masvidal went on his run to become a star, he was like bang, 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 got in there. Couple fights in a row. Great performances. That's how you build the momentum. That's how you build the star. That's what we need the UFC to do. Get Tom Aspinall moving here. Whether it's Jones or not, get it going.